Now he comes to the topic given as the title. For instance, there is a current impression that it is unpleasant to have to run after one's hat. Why should it be unpleasant to the well-ordered and pious mind? So running after one's hat is considered to be an unpleasant experience to some of the people. And he puts the question, why should it be unpleasant experience? A very ordered and pious mind, a simple person, one who has a systematic mind, may consider this running after one's hat as something unpleasant. Not merely because it is running and running exhausts one. Maybe to a systematic mind, running in general makes one tired. Not because of that. The same people run much faster in games and sports. He says, if they are taking part in a sports activity, then it is taken for granted that running is good. But when they see a man running after his hat, then why should he be upset by that? Why it is unpleasant to him? The same people run much more eagerly after an uninteresting little leather ball than they will after a nice silk hat. If it is in sports or games, you can see players running after the ball. So is that advisable? Is that an experience which gives pleasure? But why not running after one's hat? So he puts the question, the activity is the same. But somehow to a systematic, ordered mind, it is running after one's hat is considered unpleasant. Why? He doesn't know. There is an idea that it is humiliating, insulting, shameful to run after one's hat. And when people say it is humiliating, they mean that it is comic. So they can, the one who brands running after one's hat as something humiliating, insulting, shameful, it's comic really. Maybe they mean it like that. It certainly is comic. He also vouches the same. But a man is very comic creature. In that sense, there are so many comic things we do in our daily lives. A man is very comic creature. There is irony there. Man, he can see man as comic, and all the actions a person does as comic, and most of the things he does are comic. Eating, for instance. So if you take one by one, eating is a comic thing, and the most comic things of all are exactly the things that are most worth doing. But the more comic, the more it is worth doing. You take the life of a human being, he goes into many activities in his daily life, and if you take part by part, these are all comic. And why in that list running after one's hat cannot be included? Then even such as making love is worth doing. It's also a comic act of making love. A man running after a hat is not half so ridiculous as a man running after a wife. And finally, he concludes that paragraph saying, a man running after a hat is not half so ridiculous, foolish as a man running after a wife. Think about a man running after a wife. There are so many instances you find women, wives being chased by husbands. Then why should it be? It's also a comic act, It can also mean that these are lively exercises, but still it is comic, but it is not foolish as running after a man's wife. Running after one's hat is not foolish, half foolish as running after one's own wife. So the passage really is very humorous, and his argument, even though it seems silly, but once you find the crux of that argument, I think he is very sensible in making a new perspective in us. Now, a man could, if he felt rightly in the matter, run after his hat with the manliest ardor and the most sacred joy. So look at the combinations of words. So a man running after his hat, you can see a man, one who has the manliest ardor, the bravest enthusiasm. He should be brave, he should be enthusiastic, and then only he could run after one's hat. And the most sacred joy, it gives him happiness. It's a kind of holy pleasure he gets when he. So he's trying to defend the act of running after one's hat. He might regard himself as a jolly huntsman pursuing a wild animal, for certainly no animal could be wilder. Then he compares, then he gives some examples or analogies. Think of him as a jolly huntsman, a hunter, pursuing a wild animal. He's about to hunt, because a man running after his hat is brave, is enthusiastic. So it is like pursuing a wild animal. Then for certainly no animal could be wilder. So if he runs or if he chases the wildest animal to hunt, it gives him so much of pleasure, sacred joy. It is just like he gets the same kind of joy in running after his hat. In fact, I am inclined to believe that hat hunting on a windy day will be the sport of the upper classes of the future. So he makes a prediction. In future, this will be a game which is treasured by, which is liked by the upper class people. So he visualizes such a scene. Hat hunting on a windy day. On a windy day, when you hunt for the hat will go to different, it will be carried away by the wind, and you have to sometimes run in a zigzag manner and concentrate on it. So it will be a fun for the upper class people who want to idle away the time. There will be a meet of ladies. So then he visualizes many ladies and gentlemen on a high ground. They will gather there on a windy, gusty, windy morning. They will be told that the processional attendants have started a hat. So the mic announcement will come that the processional attendants, those who are in control of the game, will tell them that from etiquette, from a bush, the hat hunting has just begun, or the attendants have started a hat in such and such a thicket. Thicket is the bush. So they will start from the corner of the bush sometimes, or whatever the technical term. So in every game you have such technical terms. So if you consider something as so serious, then you have to take this also, hat hunting also, in a significant manner. Notice that this employment will in the fullest degree combine sport with humanitarianism. He makes another point. These kind of sports activities really combine the sport with humanitarianism. So these two, not only it gives pleasure, it is a humane condition of man to please others. The hunters would feel that they were not inflicting pain. The one advantage is that you are not inflicting pain to anybody. You are just giving pleasure to somebody. Nay, they would feel that they were inflicting pleasure, causing pleasure. So the same word inflicting is used. Usually we speak of inflicting pain to someone. But here he says, you just inflict pleasure to people. Rich, almost riotous pleasure. Riotous pleasure. A riot, you know the meaning of the word riot. It's a chaotic scene, noisy scene, people running after the other. But riotous pleasure. It's an example of paradox upon the people who were looking on. So you inflict pleasure to the onlookers by engaging in such a game, and there is total pleasure throughout. You're radiating pleasure. There is riotous pleasure to the people who try to witness this. When at last I saw an old gentleman running after his hat in Hyde Park, I told him that a heart so benevolent as is ought to be filled with peace and thanks at the thought of how much unaffected pleasure his every gesture and bodily attitude were at that moment giving to the crowd. So he gives an anecdote. So these are all fictional, really. He saw an old gentleman in Hyde Park. It is a park in West London, a celebrated park in West London. So an old gentleman was running after his hat. Then when I saw him, I told him that he has a benevolent heart, a very kind heart, and he should be filled with peace and thanks at the thought of how much unaffected pleasure. So very simple, innocent pleasure he provides by his bodily movements, by his mannerisms, by his actions. So he should be thankful for being so kind, as radiating all the enjoyment, all the pleasure to the crowd, to the onlookers.